This is your fault. Look what happened.
The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital flickered above Kwame's head as he paced the waiting room, his knuckles still raw and swollen. Blood stained the collar of his white shirt, but it wasn't his blood. It was hers. His wife's. The woman he had promised to love and protect was now somewhere behind those double doors, fighting for her life, and the doctor's words kept replaying in his mind like a broken record. Mr. Johnson, there's something you need to know about your wife's condition. Something we discovered during our examination. Kwame had grabbed the doctor's coat, his voice desperate. What is it? Is she going to be okay? Please tell me she's going to be okay. The doctor's face had gone pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. Mr. Johnson, your wife is 6 months pregnant. The world stopped spinning. Everything went silent. 6 months pregnant. The words echoed in Kwame's skull like thunder. He stumbled backward, his legs giving way beneath him as he collapsed into a plastic chair. His hands, the same hands that had struck Amara just 2 hours ago in their living room, began to tremble uncontrollably. No, he whispered. No, no, no. That's not possible. She never told me. She never said anything. But even as the words left his mouth, the memories came flooding back. Amara's loose-fitting dresses over the past few months. The way she'd been holding her stomach lately. The tears in her eyes when she looked at him. She had been trying to tell him. She had been trying to find the right moment, waiting for him to be calm, waiting for him to be the man she had fallen in love with 5 years ago. Instead, he had come home angry tonight. Angry about losing his job. Angry about the bills piling up. Angry at the world. And when Amara had asked him where he'd been, when she'd smelled the alcohol on his breath and questioned him, he had exploded. The doctor's voice cut through his thoughts. There's more, Mr. Johnson. The baby's heartbeat is very weak. The trauma from the assault has caused complications. We're doing everything we can, but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we might lose them both. Kwame's scream tore through the hospital corridor, a sound of pure anguish that made nurses stop in their tracks. He fell to his knees, his body shaking with sobs. What had he done? What had he become? The monster his own father had been? The man he swore he would never turn into? A nurse approached him cautiously. Sir, you need to calm down. The police are on their way. They'll want to speak with you about what happened tonight. But Kwame couldn't hear her. All he could see was Amara's face as she had fallen, her hand instinctively moving to protect her stomach. A stomach that held his child. A child he didn't even know existed. A child that might never take its first breath because of him. The double doors swung open, and another doctor rushed out, calling for more assistance. The urgency in their movements made Kwame's blood run cold. Something was going wrong. Something terrible was happening behind those doors, and it was all his fault. If you're watching this story and feeling the weight of Kwame's terrible mistake, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Lives can change in an instant, and sometimes we need these stories to remind us of what truly matters. But how did Kwame and Amara's love story turn into this nightmare? To understand that, we need to go back to where it all began. 5 years earlier, Kwame Johnson had been a different man entirely. He stood tall and proud in his security guard uniform outside the West African Market on Franklin Avenue, his smile bright enough to light up the entire block. That's where he first saw Amara Williams, stepping out of her father's old Chevy with a basket of vegetables balanced on her hip. She wore a yellow sundress that day, her natural hair pulled back in a thick braid that hung down her back. When their eyes met, Kwame felt something shift inside his chest. He'd dated before, but this was different. Amara had a light about her, a warmth that seemed to radiate from within. "Excuse me," she'd said, her voice soft and melodic. "Could you help me with these bags? My father usually helps, but his back has been giving him trouble." Kwame had practically tripped over his own feet rushing to assist her. They talked for 20 minutes in that parking lot, and by the time she left, he had her phone number written on a receipt in his pocket and hope blooming in his heart for the first time in years. Their courtship had been beautiful. Kwame worked double shifts to take Amara to nice restaurants. They'd walk through Piedmont Park on Sundays after church, talking about their dreams. Amara wanted to open her own hair salon someday. Kwame dreamed of becoming a police officer, following in his uncle's footsteps. "You're going to be amazing," Amara would tell him, her hand warm in his. "I can see it in you, Kwame. You have a good heart." If only she could see that heart now, he thought bitterly as he sat in that hospital waiting room. If only she could see what it had become. They'd married in a small ceremony at Greater Faith Baptist Church, with Amara's family filling the pews with joy and laughter. Kwame's side was emptier. His mother had passed when he was 12, and his father, well, his father wasn't welcome. The man had spent Kwame's childhood terrorizing his mother, and Kwame had sworn on her grave that he would never become that man. Yet here he sat, his wife's blood still under his fingernails. The first year of marriage had been perfect. Kwame got promoted to supervisor at the security company. Amara started taking cosmetology classes at night. They'd rented a small apartment in College Park, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. They'd painted the walls together, hung pictures, made love on lazy Sunday mornings, and talked about the children they would have someday. 3, Amara had said, snuggled against his chest. "I want 3 babies. 2 boys and a girl." "Whatever you want, baby," Kwame had promised, kissing her forehead. "I'll give you the world." But promises are easy to make when life is good. It's when the storms come that you discover what you're really made of. The trouble started in year 3. Kwame's security company lost a major contract, and hours were cut. He picked up a second job doing overnight shifts at a warehouse, but the lack of sleep made him irritable. Amara tried to be understanding, but the strain showed in their conversations, in the way they started snapping at each other over small things. Then Kwame's application to the police academy was rejected. Not once, but twice. The second rejection had come with a letter explaining that his psych evaluation showed concerning anger management issues. Kwame had crumpled that letter and thrown it across the room, punching a hole in the wall that Amara had carefully covered with a picture frame. "It's okay, baby," she'd said, even though fear flickered in her eyes. "You'll get in next time. We'll work through this together." But Kwame had started pulling away. He'd started stopping at the bar after work, just 1 drink at first, then 2, then however many it took to quiet the voice in his head that sounded eerily like his father's. The voice that called him a failure. The voice that said he'd never be good enough. The first time he'd raised his hand to Amara was 4 months ago. She'd questioned why he'd spent their rent money, and before he knew what was happening, his palm had connected with her cheek. The sound had echoed through their apartment like a gunshot. Amara had stood there, frozen, her hand on her reddening cheek, tears streaming down her face. Kwame had immediately broken down, apologizing, begging, promising it would never happen again. And she'd forgiven him. God help her, she'd forgiven him. But it did happen again. And again. Each time followed by tearful apologies, by promises to change, by brief periods of peace before the next explosion. Amara had become quieter, smaller, always walking on eggshells around him. And Kwame had become the very thing he'd sworn to never be. Now, as he sat in that waiting room, he realized that Amara must have discovered she was pregnant during one of those peaceful periods. She must have held that secret close, waiting for the right moment to share the joy, waiting for her husband to come back to her. Instead, he'd killed him. He'd killed the man she'd married and replaced him with a monster. A police officer appeared in the doorway, hand resting on his belt. "Kwame Johnson?" Kwame looked up, his face wet with tears. "Yes. I need you to come with me, sir. We have some questions about tonight's incident." As Kwame stood, his legs shaking, the double doors burst open again. A nurse ran out, shouting for the doctor. Kwame caught only 2 words that made his heart stop completely. "We're losing her." The police officer's grip tightened on Kwame's arm, but Kwame wasn't going anywhere. He broke free and lunged toward the double doors, desperation fueling his movements. "Amara," he screamed. "Amara, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." 2 security guards appeared from nowhere, restraining him as he fought against their hold. The officer who'd come to question him stepped forward, his face a mask of professional restraint, though his eyes betrayed his disgust. "Mr. Johnson, you need to calm down right now, or I will place you under arrest for assaulting these officers." "You don't understand," Kwame sobbed, his body going limp in the guard's arms. "That's my wife in there. That's my baby. I didn't know. I didn't know she was pregnant." "That doesn't change what you did to her," the officer said coldly. "Now, you can either cooperate or we can do this the hard way." They led Kwame to a small consultation room down the hall, away from the chaos of the emergency area. The fluorescent lights seemed even harsher here, exposing every detail of his guilt. The officer sat across from him, pulling out a notepad. "My name is Officer Marcus Thompson. I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight." Kwame's hands shook as he tried to find the words. How do you explain the unexplainable? How do you justify the unjustifiable? "I came home from the bar around 8 o'clock, he began, his voice barely a whisper. "I'd been drinking. I'd lost my job 3 days ago, and I hadn't told Amara yet. I was ashamed." Officer Thompson wrote without looking up. "Continue." "She was in the kitchen making dinner. She'd cooked my favorite, jollof rice with chicken, like she was celebrating something. She smiled at me when I walked in, and she said she had something important to tell me." Kwame's voice cracked. "She must have been going to tell me about the baby. But you didn't let her speak, did you?"
"No."
The word came out like a confession in church. I could smell the food, and it made me angry. Angry that she was acting like everything was fine when our world was falling apart. Angry that she didn't know I'd lost the job. Angry at myself for being such a failure. "So you hit her?" She asked me where I'd been. She said I smelled like alcohol and cigarettes. She asked if I'd been gambling again. Kwame's whole body trembled now. I told her to mind her business. She said it was her business because we were married, because she was my wife. And I just snapped. The room fell silent except for the scratch of Officer Thompson's pen against paper. "I pushed her first," Kwame continued, the words tumbling out like poison he needed to purge. "She fell against the kitchen counter. Then she said something that made me see red. She said, 'You're becoming just like your father.' And I lost it completely." Officer Thompson finally looked up, his jaw tight. "How many times did you strike her, Mr. Johnson?" "I don't know. 3 times? 4? My fist, not just my hand this time. I hit her in the face, in the ribs. She tried to protect herself, tried to curl up, but I was so angry. So angry at everything. At her for being right. At myself for proving her right." "What made you stop?" Kwame closed his eyes, but the image was burned into his brain forever. She stopped moving. She just lay there on the kitchen floor, blood coming from her nose and mouth. And suddenly, it was like I woke up from a nightmare. I saw what I'd done. I saw my mother's face. I saw my father standing over her the same way I was standing over Amara. "Is that when you called 911?
"Yes."
"I called and told them I'd hurt my wife badly, that she needed help. Then I just held her until the ambulance came. She was unconscious. I kept begging her to wake up, to forgive me, but she wouldn't open her eyes." Officer Thompson closed his notebook. "Mr. Johnson, you're under arrest for aggravated assault and domestic violence. You have the right to remain silent." Before he could finish reading the Miranda rights, the door burst open. It was the doctor from earlier, still in his surgical scrubs, his face grave. "Officer, I need to speak with Mr. Johnson immediately. There's been a development." Kwame stood so fast his chair fell backward. "Is she alive? Please, God, tell me she's alive." The doctor looked at him with an expression Kwame couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger or disgust this time. It was something worse. It was pity mixed with something else. Something that looked almost like horror. "Your wife is stable for now," the doctor said carefully. "But, Mr. Johnson, we need to talk about the baby." "The baby's alive?" Hope surged through Kwame's chest like a tidal wave. "Yes, but there's something you need to understand. When we were examining your wife, we discovered something unusual. Something that changes everything about tonight." Officer Thompson stood as well, sensing the gravity of the moment. "What is it, doctor?" The doctor took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving Kwame's face. Your wife isn't 6 months pregnant, Mr. Johnson. According to our ultrasound and medical records we were able to access, she's been pregnant for 7.5 months. The baby is fully developed and could survive outside the womb. Kwame's mind raced, trying to do the math. 7.5 months. That meant Amara had been pregnant almost from the beginning of when things got bad. She'd been carrying his child through every argument, every insult, every raised hand. But that's not all, the doctor continued, his voice dropping lower. Your wife has extensive scarring and healed fractures that we discovered during our examination. Old injuries. Mr. Johnson, how long has this abuse been going on? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Kwame couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. And there's one more thing, the doctor said, pulling out a tablet and turning it toward them. On the screen was an ultrasound image. Mr. Johnson, you're not having one baby. Your wife is carrying twins. The world tilted on its axis.
Twins.
2 babies. 2 innocent lives that he'd put in danger. 2 children who might grow up without a mother because of him. We need to perform an emergency C-section within the next hour, the doctor explained. The trauma has caused placental abruption. If we wait any longer, we'll lose all 3 of them. Before anyone could respond, a nurse ran into the room, her face panicked. Doctor, you need to come now. The patient is seizing. We're losing her again. Have you ever made a mistake so terrible that you knew your life would never be the same? Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, and if you've ever witnessed something that changed your perspective on life forever. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will shock you to your core. The doctor sprinted from the room, his shoes squeaking against the polished hospital floor. Kwame tried to follow, but Officer Thompson grabbed his arm firmly. You're not going anywhere near her, the officer said, his voice hard as steel. Those are my children, Kwame shouted, tears streaming down his face. Please, I need to see her. I need to tell her I'm sorry. What if she dies without knowing how sorry I am? She knows what you are, Officer Thompson said quietly. The question is, do you? They led Kwame back to the waiting room, handcuffing him to a chair this time. Other families waiting for news about their loved ones stared at him with undisguised contempt. An elderly woman with gray hair wrapped in a colorful headscarf looked at him with such disappointment that Kwame had to turn away. She reminded him of his mother. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Every second that ticked by on the wall clock above the reception desk was another second his wife and children hung between life and death. Kwame prayed for the first time since his mother's funeral. He prayed to a God he wasn't sure was listening anymore, a God he'd stopped believing in when life got hard. Please, he whispered, his head bowed. Don't let them die. Take me instead. Let them live. They're innocent, especially those babies. They never did anything wrong. This is all on me. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, walked past with her mother. She stopped and stared at Kwame with wide, curious eyes. Mama, why is that man crying? She asked innocently. Her mother pulled her away quickly, whispering something Kwame couldn't hear, but he caught the way she looked at him, like he was something dangerous, something to be feared. And she was right. Officer Thompson's radio crackled to life. Thompson, what's your status? Still at Mercy General with the suspect. Waiting on medical update. Copy that. Detective Harris wants to know if he's cooperating. Affirmative. He's not going anywhere. Kwame's mind drifted to Amara's family. Her father, Mr. Williams, who had welcomed him into their home with open arms. Her mother, who had taught him how to make her special pepper soup. Her younger brother, Marcus, who looked up to Kwame like a hero. What would they think when they found out? How could he ever face them again? The answer was simple. He couldn't. He destroyed not just his own life and Amara's, but an entire family's trust and love. A commotion at the emergency room entrance made everyone turn. A tall man in his 60s burst through the doors, his face frantic with worry. Behind him came a woman in a church dress, her hand pressed to her mouth. It was Amara's parents. "Where is my daughter?" Mr. Williams demanded at the reception desk. "Where is Amara Johnson? We got a call that she was brought here by ambulance." Kwame felt his stomach drop. He tried to sink lower in his chair, tried to make himself invisible, but it was too late. Mrs. Williams spotted him, and her scream pierced the quiet waiting room. "You," she shrieked, rushing toward him. "What did you do to my baby? What did you do to my daughter?" Officer Thompson stepped between them, his hands up. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Calm down." Mrs. Williams's voice broke with anguish. "That monster has my daughter in this hospital. Don't tell me to calm down." Mr. Williams approached more slowly, his face a mixture of rage and heartbreak. He stopped just feet from Kwame, staring down at him with eyes that had once looked at him with fatherly pride. "I trusted you," Mr. Williams said, his voice shaking. "I gave you my daughter's hand in marriage. I welcomed you into our family. And this is how you repay that trust." "Mr. Williams, Kwame started, but the older man cut him off. "Don't you dare speak to me. Don't you dare say her name. You are dead to this family. Do you hear me? Dead." A nurse appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams? The doctor needs to speak with you about your daughter's condition. Please follow me." As Amara's parents followed the nurse through the double doors, Mrs. Williams turned back one last time. "She's pregnant," she said to Kwame, her voice filled with venom. "Did you know that? She called me 2 weeks ago, so excited to tell me she was carrying twins. She was planning to surprise you. She thought it would fix everything between you two. She thought a baby would bring back the man she married." The words hit Kwame like bullets. 2 weeks ago. Amara had known for weeks and had been planning the perfect moment to tell him. Instead, he'd given her the worst night of her life. "She was going to tell you tonight," Mrs. Williams continued, tears streaming down her face. "She made your favorite meal. She'd bought a little gift box with 2 pairs of baby shoes inside. She was so happy, so full of hope. And you destroyed her. You destroyed everything." Officer Thompson gently ushered her away, but her words echoed in Kwame's mind. Baby shoes. Amara had bought baby shoes. She'd been preparing to celebrate their future, while Kwame had been drowning in a bar, feeling sorry for himself. An hour passed, then another. The waiting room slowly emptied as other families received news about their loved ones and went home. Kwame remained chained to his chair, a prisoner of his own making. Finally, the double doors opened. The doctor emerged, still in his surgical scrubs, now stained with blood. Behind him came Mr. and Mrs. Williams, both crying. Kwame's heart seized in his chest. "No," he breathed. "No, please no." The doctor approached him slowly, and Kwame searched his face desperately for any sign of hope, any indication that his worst nightmare hadn't come true. "Mr. Johnson," the doctor began, his voice carefully neutral. "We performed the emergency C-section. The babies were delivered safely. 2 boys, both weighing just over 4 pounds each. They're in the NICU, but they're breathing on their own. It's a miracle they survived." Relief flooded through Kwame so intensely he thought he might pass out. "And Amara? Is she okay? Can I see her?" The doctor's expression shifted, and Kwame felt his brief moment of hope begin to crumble. "Your wife is alive," the doctor said slowly. "But there were complications during the surgery. Significant complications. Mr. Johnson, your wife has slipped into a coma." The words didn't make sense at first.
Coma.
Amara was in a coma. "When will she wake up?" Kwame asked desperately. The doctor exchanged a glance with Officer Thompson before responding. "We don't know if she will wake up, Mr. Johnson. The trauma to her head was severe. There's swelling on her brain. We've done everything we can, but now it's a waiting game. She could wake up tomorrow, or next week, or—" He trailed off, leaving the terrible possibility unspoken. Or never. She might never wake up. "But there's something else," the doctor continued, his voice dropping even lower. "Something we discovered during the surgery that you need to know about. Something that explains a lot about your wife's behavior over the past few months." Mr. Williams stepped forward, his face twisted with fresh anguish. "Tell him, doctor." Tell him what his violence has really cost. The doctor pulled out a medical chart, his hands trembling slightly. Mr. Johnson, when we were operating on your wife, we found evidence of previous internal injuries. Old bleeding that had healed improperly. Damage to her spleen and liver from repeated trauma. Your wife has been suffering in silence for months, perhaps longer. Kwame felt bile rise in his throat. But what's most significant, the doctor continued, is what we found in her medical records from her previous visits to the clinic. Mr. Johnson, your wife had been diagnosed with something 3 months ago. Something she never told you about. The doctor's words hung in the air like a death sentence waiting to be pronounced. Kwame's heart hammered against his ribs, so hard he thought it might break through. What diagnosis? He whispered. What was wrong with her? The doctor looked at Amara's parents, as if asking permission. Mrs. Williams nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Your wife was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor 3 months ago, the doctor explained. It's called a meningioma. It's not cancerous, but it was growing and putting pressure on certain parts of her brain. That's why she'd been having headaches, why she seemed tired all the time, why her mood would shift unexpectedly. Kwame felt the room spin around him. A brain tumor. Amara had a brain tumor and never told him. The tumor was treatable, the doctor continued. She was scheduled for surgery next month, after the babies were born. The plan was to deliver the twins early, let her recover for a week, then remove the tumor. It was all planned out. She would have been fine. Would have been. Kwame croaked. The trauma you inflicted tonight caused severe swelling in her brain. That swelling, combined with the existing tumor, has created a critical situation. The pressure in her skull is dangerously high. We've done what we can to reduce it, but the damage from tonight's beating has complicated everything. Mr. Williams stepped closer, his voice raw with pain. She didn't tell you about the tumor because she was afraid. Afraid of how you'd react. Afraid you'd see her as weak or broken. She told us she wanted to wait until she could share good news and bad news together. The babies were supposed to be the good news that softened the blow of her diagnosis. She was protecting you, Mrs. Williams added bitterly. Even while you were hurting her, she was trying to protect your feelings. She made us promise not to tell you. She said you were under so much stress already, and she didn't want to add to your burden. Kwame's mind flashed back to the past 3 months. Amara bringing him water when he had headaches, always so gentle and understanding. She'd been the one suffering, the one facing a terrifying diagnosis, but she'd been taking care of him. Even when he was at his worst, she'd been thinking of him. Can I see her? Kwame begged. Please, I need to see her. I need to tell her. Tell her what? Mr. Williams exploded. Tell her you're sorry? Sorry doesn't fix what you've done. Sorry doesn't wake her up. Sorry doesn't take back the months of terror you put her through. Officer Thompson put a hand on Mr. Williams's shoulder. Sir, I understand you're upset, but... Upset? Mr. Williams laughed, but there was no humor in it. My daughter is in a coma. My grandsons are in incubators fighting for their lives. And the man responsible is sitting here asking for forgiveness. I'm not upset, officer. I'm devastated. The doctor cleared his throat. There's more you need to know, Mr. Johnson. When your wife does wake up, if she wakes up, there's a significant chance she'll have permanent neurological damage. Memory loss, motor function impairment, personality changes. The woman you knew may not be the woman who wakes up. Each word was a nail in the coffin of Kwame's soul. He'd not only hurt Amara, not only endangered his children, but he might have stolen away the very essence of who she was. The babies, Kwame said suddenly. Can I at least see my sons? Mrs. Williams stepped forward, her voice ice-cold. Those babies don't have a father. Not anymore. We're filing for emergency custody. You'll never touch those children. You'll never breathe the same air as them if we have anything to say about it. You can't do that, Kwame protested weakly. They're my children. You gave up that right when you put your hands on their mother, Mr. Williams said. You think we'll let you anywhere near those innocent babies? You think we'll risk you doing to them what you did to Amara? To what you did to your own mother? The mention of his mother made Kwame flinch. How do you know about my mother? Amara told us everything, Mrs. Williams said. She told us about your childhood, about what your father did to your mother. She thought understanding your past would help her save you. She thought love could heal you. But you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Officer Thompson's radio crackled again. Thompson, Detective Harris is en route. ETA 5 minutes. He wants the suspect ready for transport. Copy that, Officer Thompson replied. He turned to Kwame. Mr. Johnson, you're being transferred to county jail. You'll be formally charged and arraigned in the morning. Wait, Kwame pleaded. Please, just let me see them. Even if it's through a window. Let me see my wife and my children. Let me see what I've done. The doctor considered this for a moment. Officer, I think it might actually be appropriate. Sometimes seeing the full consequences of one's actions can be part of the justice process. Officer Thompson was skeptical, but something in the doctor's tone made him reconsider.
Fine.
But he stays cuffed, and I don't let him out of my sight. They led Kwame down a long corridor, past rooms filled with beeping machines and worried families. First, they stopped at the NICU. Through a large window, Kwame could see rows of tiny incubators. The nurse pointed to two near the back. Those are your sons, she said flatly. Kwame pressed his face against the glass. Two impossibly small babies lay in their plastic boxes, tubes and wires attached to their fragile bodies. They were so tiny, so vulnerable. One of them moved his little hand, and Kwame felt his heart shatter into a million pieces. They don't have names yet, the nurse said. Your wife was unconscious when they were born, and as her husband, you technically have the right to name them. But Mr. and Mrs. Williams have petitioned the court to override that right. I would have named them after my uncle and Amara's father, Kwame said softly. Marcus and William. That's what Amara wanted. She told me years ago, before everything went wrong. Mrs. Williams, who had followed them, let out a sob. Those were the names she'd chosen. She wrote them down in a journal she kept hidden under the bed. For a moment, just a brief moment, there was a flicker of the family they could have been. But then reality crashed back down. Come on, Officer Thompson said. Time to see your wife. They walked to the intensive care unit. The doctor swiped a card to let them through the secure doors. Inside, the lighting was dimmer, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of lives hanging in the balance. Amara's room was at the end of the hall. Through the window, Kwame could see her lying in the bed, surrounded by machines. Her face was swollen and bruised, barely recognizable. A breathing tube ran down her throat. Bandages covered her head where they'd operated. Can I go in? Kwame asked, his voice breaking. The doctor nodded. For 2 minutes. No more. Officer Thompson unlocked one of the handcuffs, chaining Kwame's free hand to a rail by the door. He could reach the bed, but not move beyond it. Kwame approached Amara's bedside slowly, as if she might shatter if he moved too quickly. Up close, the damage was even worse. Her beautiful face was a canvas of purple and black bruises. His work. His handiwork, painted across the woman he'd sworn to protect. Amara, he whispered, taking her hand. It was cold and limp in his. Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you can't hear me, but I need you to know. I need you to understand. The machines beeped steadily, the only sign that she was still alive. I love you, Kwame continued, tears dripping onto their joined hands. I never stopped loving you. I just got lost. I became the monster I swore I'd never be. And you paid the price for my weakness. He looked at her face, searching for any sign of recognition, any indication that some part of her could hear him. But there was nothing. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the whoosh of the ventilator breathing for her. Our sons are beautiful, he said. They look like you. They have your nose, your little chin. They're fighters, just like their mama. They're going to make it. They have to make it. Time's up, Officer Thompson said from the doorway. Just 1 more minute, Kwame begged. Please. But as he looked down at Amara's broken body, something on the monitor caught his attention. Her heart rate had suddenly spiked. Then it began to drop rapidly. Doctor? Kwame shouted. Something's wrong. The doctor rushed in, immediately checking the monitors. His face went pale. She's crashing. Get the crash cart.
Now.
Nurses flooded into the room, pushing Kwame out of the way. Officer Thompson dragged him back to the doorway as the medical team swarmed around Amara's bed. Clear, someone shouted. Amara's body jerked as they shocked her heart.
Once. Twice. 3 times.
We're losing her, a nurse called out. The heart monitor's beeping became a single, long, terrible tone. Mrs. Williams screamed from behind Kwame.
No.
No, not my baby. God, please, not my baby. Kwame watched in horror as they worked frantically to save his wife's life. The life he'd put in jeopardy. The life that was slipping away before his eyes. And as he stood there, chained and helpless, Kwame realized that this was his hell. Not prison, not punishment, but this moment right here. Watching the woman he loved die because of him, powerless to stop it, forced to witness the full extent of his destruction. If you're still watching, take a moment to think about the power of our choices. Every action has consequences, some we can never take back. Hit that like button if the story is touching your heart, and subscribe because you need to see how this ends. Share this with someone who needs to understand that violence is never the answer. Comment below, what would you have done if you were in Kwame's position? How do we break cycles of violence before they destroy the people we love? The sound of the flatlines seemed to last forever, an endless wail that pierced through Kwame's soul. He watched through blurred vision as the medical team worked with practiced urgency, their movements a choreographed dance between life and death. Starting compressions, one nurse announced, positioning herself over Amara's chest. Charged to 300, the doctor ordered. Charged and ready. Clear. Amara's body jolted again. The monitor stayed flat. Mrs. Williams collapsed against her husband, her sobs filling the hallway. Mr. Williams held her tight, his own face crumbling as he watched his daughter fight for her life. Again, the doctor said, his voice steady despite the sweat on his brow. Charged to 360. Doctor, we've been at this for 3 minutes, a nurse said quietly. I said again, the doctor repeated firmly. We don't give up. Not yet. Kwame's legs gave out, and he sank to the floor, the handcuff cutting into his wrist as Officer Thompson tried to keep him upright. He didn't care about the pain. Physical pain was nothing compared to what he felt watching Amara slip away. Come back, he whispered. Amara, please come back. Don't leave those babies. Don't leave them without a mother. They need you. I need you. Clear. Another shock. The monitor flickered. Then, impossibly, a beep. Then another. A weak, irregular rhythm, but a rhythm nonetheless. We've got a pulse, the nurse called out. Weak, but it's there. The room erupted in controlled chaos as they stabilized her. The doctor wiped his forehead, relief evident on his face despite his professional composure. She's back, he announced. But she's extremely unstable. We need to get her to the ICU stat. Prepare for immediate transfer. As they wheeled Amara's bed out of the room, she passed right by Kwame. He reached out instinctively, but Officer Thompson pulled him back. For just a second, Kwame could have sworn he saw her eyelid flutter, as if some part of her knew he was there. Amara, he called after her. I love you. Please fight. Please don't give up. Mr. Williams turned to face him, and in that moment, all his rage seemed to have transformed into something else. Something sadder and more resigned. You want to know the worst part of all this? Mr. Williams said quietly. She loved you. Even after everything, she still loved you. She told her mother just last week that she believed you could change. That the man she married was still in there somewhere, buried under all the anger and pain. She was wrong, Mrs. Williams added, her voice hoarse from crying. That man is dead. He died the first time you raised your hand to her. The person sitting here now is just a shell wearing his face. Officer Thompson helped Kwame to his feet. Come on. Detective Harris is here. Time to go. As they walked back toward the waiting room, Kwame caught sight of a young couple entering the hospital, the woman visibly pregnant, her husband's arm protectively around her waist. They were smiling, excited, probably here for a routine checkup or maybe about to have their baby. They looked at each other with such love, such trust. That could have been him and Amara.
Should have been them.
Detective Harris was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much of humanity's darkness. He looked at Kwame with the weariness of someone who dealt with cases like this too many times before. "Kwame Johnson?" he asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. "Yes, sir. I'm Detective Harris. I'll be handling your case. Officer Thompson has briefed me on the situation. Before we transport you, I need to ask you some questions. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be appointed to you. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes, sir." "Do you wish to speak with me without an attorney present?" Kwame nodded. "I don't need a lawyer to tell the truth. I did this. All of it. I hurt my wife. I put my children in danger. There's no defense for what I've done." Detective Harris pulled out a recorder. "For the record, Mr. Johnson has waived his right to an attorney and has agreed to speak with me. Mr. Johnson, tell me about your relationship with your wife. When did the abuse start?" For the next hour, Kwame told his story. He didn't hold back, didn't try to minimize or justify. He told the detective everything, from the first slap to tonight's brutal beating. He talked about his father, about his childhood, about the promise he'd broken to his dying mother. "My mother made me swear on her deathbed," Kwame said, his voice raw. "She grabbed my hand, and even though she could barely speak, she made me promise I'd never be like him. Never hurt a woman the way he hurt her. And I promised. God, I promised her." "But you broke that promise," Detective Harris said. "Every single day for the past 4 months. And you want to know the worst part? Each time I did it, I'd hear my father's voice in my head, justifying it, saying she deserved it, saying I had to show her who was boss. I became the very thing I hated most in this world." Detective Harris turned off the recorder. "Mr. Johnson, I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've seen hundreds of domestic violence cases. Some perpetrators are monsters through and through, but some are broken people who break others. You seem to fall into the latter category. Does it matter which one I am?" Kwame asked bitterly. "The result is the same. My wife is in a coma. My children might grow up without a mother." "It matters for sentencing," the detective said. "It matters because the system tries to differentiate between people who can be rehabilitated and people who can't. But I'll be honest with you, son. The road ahead of you is long and hard. Even if your wife survives, even if she forgives you, the state won't. You're looking at serious time."
"I don't care about that," Kwame said.
"I just want them to be okay. That's all that matters now." A nurse approached them, holding a clipboard. "Detective Harris? Mr. and Mrs. Williams have requested that Mr. Johnson not be allowed any contact with the babies. They're filing a restraining order. The judge has granted an emergency order effective immediately." Kwame felt his last bit of hope crumble. "I won't even get to hold them?" "No, sir," the nurse said, not unkindly. "I'm sorry." Detective Harris stood. "It's time to go, Mr. Johnson. You'll be processed at county jail tonight, and your arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9. As they led Kwame toward the exit, he took one last look at the hospital. Somewhere in this building were his wife and his sons, 3 people whose lives he'd irrevocably changed. 3 people he might never see again, at least not as a free man. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. Stars twinkled overhead, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding below. A police cruiser waited at the curb, its lights painting the parking lot in alternating shades of red and blue. "Watch your head," Officer Thompson said as he guided Kwame into the back seat. As they pulled away from the hospital, Kwame turned for one last glimpse. Through a window on the 4th floor, he could see the NICU. 2 tiny lives hanging in the balance. His sons, Marcus and William. Names they might never officially carry because their father had destroyed any right he had to name them. The drive to the jail was silent except for the crackle of the police radio. Kwame stared out the window at the city passing by. People going about their lives, unaware that in one small apartment in College Park, there was a kitchen floor still stained with blood. A table still set with dinner that would never be eaten. Baby shoes still wrapped in tissue paper, waiting for a celebration that would never come. At the jail, the intake process was mechanical and dehumanizing. Strip search, medical examination, fingerprints, mugshot. Kwame went through it all like a zombie, his mind still back at the hospital. They gave him an orange jumpsuit and led him to a holding cell. It was small and cold, with a metal bench and a toilet in the corner. 3 other men were already there, waiting for their own arraignments. "What you in for?" one of them asked, a young guy with tattoos covering his neck. "Domestic violence," Kwame answered quietly. The man's face hardened. "Man, I hate dudes who beat on women. That's weak." "Yeah," Kwame agreed. "It is." He sat on the bench and put his head in his hands. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. This cell was just the beginning. He was looking at years in prison. Years away from his sons, watching them grow up through photos and occasional visits, if he was lucky enough to get even that. But worse than the thought of prison was the thought of Amara. Was she still alive? Had she stabilized? Would she ever wake up? The not knowing was torture. A guard appeared at the cell door hours later. "Johnson, you have a visitor." Kwame looked up in surprise. "Who?" "Says she's your aunt. You got 10 minutes. They led him to a small visiting room divided by plexiglass. On the other side sat Aunt Teresa, his mother's younger sister. He hadn't seen her in over a year, not since he'd stopped returning her calls and texts. She looked older than he remembered, her hair more gray, but her eyes still held the same warmth they always had. "Aunt T," Kwame said, picking up the phone on his side of the glass. "Kwame," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Baby, what have you done?" And sitting there, looking at the woman who'd tried to be a mother to him after his own had passed, Kwame finally let himself completely break down. Not the angry tears of earlier, but deep, soul-crushing sobs that came from a place of genuine remorse and unbearable grief. "I don't know how to fix this," he cried. "Auntie, I don't know how to fix what I've broken." She pressed her hand against the glass, and he pressed his against it from his side. "Some things can't be fixed, baby," she said gently. "Some things can only be survived and learned from. The question is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Are you going to let this destroy you completely, or are you going to find a way to make something meaningful out of this pain? How can anything meaningful come from this?" "I don't know yet," Aunt Teresa admitted. "But your mama didn't raise a quitter. She raised a man who made terrible mistakes, yes, but a man who can still choose to do better. Not for Amara anymore. That ship has sailed. But for those boys. For yourself. For every other man out there who's walking the same dark path you walked." Before Kwame could respond, the guard knocked on the door. "Time's up. I'll be at your arraignment tomorrow," Aunt Teresa said quickly. "And Kwame? I called Pastor Williams from your mother's church. He's organizing a prayer vigil for Amara and the babies. A lot of people still love your family, even if they're heartbroken by what you've done." As they led him back to his cell, Kwame felt something shift inside him. It wasn't forgiveness or absolution. It wasn't even hope, exactly. But it was something. A tiny ember of purpose in the darkness. If he couldn't save Amara, if he couldn't be a father to his sons, maybe he could at least ensure that his story served as a warning. That his mistakes could somehow, some way, prevent another man from walking the same destructive path. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. The morning of Kwame's arraignment arrived with cold, harsh sunlight streaming through the jail's barred windows. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amara's face, heard the sound of his fist connecting with her skin, watched her fall to the kitchen floor again and again in an endless loop of horror. At 7 a.m., a guard brought him a tray with watery oatmeal and lukewarm coffee. Kwame couldn't eat. His stomach was twisted in knots, but not from fear of what the judge might say. His only thoughts were of the hospital, of his wife and sons fighting for their lives while he sat in a cell. "Johnson," the guard called out at 8:30. "Time to see the judge. Let's go." They shackled his hands and feet, the chains clinking as he shuffled down the corridor. Other inmates watched him pass, some with contempt, others with a recognition that made Kwame's skin crawl. How many of them were here for the same reason? How many families had been destroyed by the same cycle of violence? The courtroom was already full when they brought him in. Aunt Teresa sat in the front row, her church hat slightly crooked, her hands clutched around a worn Bible. Behind her, Kwame saw members of his mother's old church, people who had known him as a boy, people who had watched him grow up and had believed he would be different. On the other side of the courtroom sat Amara's family. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, her brother Marcus, aunts and uncles and cousins. Their faces were united in grief and anger. Mrs. Williams wouldn't even look at him. Mr. Williams stared at him with eyes that held nothing but contempt. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Monroe presiding. Judge Monroe was a black woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. She took her seat and looked down at the papers before her, then up at Kwame. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "You're being charged with aggravated assault, domestic violence in the first degree, and reckless endangerment of a minor. How do you plead?" Kwame's court-appointed attorney, a young man named David Chun, stood. "Your Honor, if I may have a moment to consult with my client." "No," Kwame interrupted, his voice clear. "I don't need to consult. I plead guilty, Your Honor, to all charges." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Mr. Chun turned to him, shocked. "Mr. Johnson, I strongly advise against." "I did it," Kwame said louder, looking directly at Judge Monroe. "I beat my wife. I put my children in danger. I'm guilty. I don't want to waste the court's time pretending otherwise." Judge Monroe studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Johnson, do you understand what you're doing? By pleading guilty without a plea agreement, you're putting yourself at the mercy of this court for sentencing. I could give you the maximum sentence allowed by law." "I understand, Your Honor. I deserve whatever punishment you see fit." "Your Honor," the prosecutor stood, a stern woman named Angela Davis. "The state would like to make the court aware of the victim's current condition. Mrs. Amara Johnson remains in a coma at Mercy General Hospital. Her prognosis is uncertain. The twins she delivered via emergency C-section are stable but remain in the NICU. Medical experts have testified that Mrs. Johnson's injuries are consistent with prolonged abuse, not just this single incident." "I'd also like to speak, Your Honor," Mr. Williams said, standing from his seat. Judge Monroe nodded. "The court recognizes Mr. Williams, father of the victim." Mr. Williams walked to the front of the courtroom. He stood there for a moment, gathering his composure, then turned to face Kwame directly. "I welcomed you into my family," he began, his voice shaking but strong. "I gave you my daughter's hand in marriage. I trusted you to protect her, to love her, to honor her. Instead, you terrorized her. You made her afraid in her own home. You stole her joy, her confidence, her sense of safety." Kwame kept his eyes on Mr. Williams, forcing himself not to look away. He owed the man at least that much. "My daughter is lying in a hospital bed right now, machines breathing for her, and we don't know if she'll ever wake up. My grandsons came into this world 2 months early because of your violence. They should have been born into a home full of love and celebration. Instead, their first moments of life were in an intensive care unit, fighting to survive." Mr. Williams's voice broke, but he pushed on. "You didn't just hurt Amara. You hurt all of us. You hurt those babies who may never know their mother. You hurt everyone who loved her, everyone who believed in you, everyone who thought you were different." He turned to Judge Monroe. "Your Honor, I'm asking for the maximum sentence. I don't want this man anywhere near my daughter or my grandsons ever again. I want him to feel a fraction of the pain he's caused our family." "Thank you, Mr. Williams," Judge Monroe said gently. "You may be seated." She looked at Kwame. "Does the defendant wish to say anything before I render my decision?" Kwame stood slowly. His attorney tried to pull him back down, but Kwame shook his head. He had to speak. He had to try, even though he knew nothing he said could fix anything. "Your Honor," There's nothing I can say that will undo what I've done. No apology that will heal the damage I've caused. I broke the woman I loved. I endangered my own children. I became the monster I swore I'd never be. He turned to face Amara's family. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, Marcus. All of you, I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate. They're meaningless compared to what I've taken from you. But they're all I have. I'm sorry for betraying your trust. I'm sorry for hurting Amara. I'm sorry for robbing those babies of the family they deserved. Mrs. Williams was crying openly now, and despite her anger, Kwame could see the pain in her eyes. The pain of a mother watching her child suffer. I know I deserve prison, Kwame continued. I know I deserve to lose everything. But if I could ask for one thing, it's this. Let me use my story as a warning. Let me make sure that what happened to Amara doesn't happen to someone else. Let my mistakes serve some purpose beyond just destruction. He turned back to Judge Monroe. I'm ready to accept whatever sentence you give me, Your Honor. I just want to know, his voice cracked. Has there been any update from the hospital? Is my wife still alive? Judge Monroe's expression softened slightly. She picked up a piece of paper that had been handed to her bailiff just moments before. As a matter of fact, Mr. Johnson, I received word from Mercy General just before court began this morning. The entire courtroom held its breath. Your wife regained consciousness at 6:45 this morning. She's awake, Mr. Johnson. The courtroom exploded. Aunt Teresa jumped to her feet, praising God. Mrs. Williams collapsed in her husband's arms, sobbing with relief. Even Kwame's attorney let out a gasp of surprise. Kwame felt his knees buckle. She was awake. Amara was awake. Is she okay?
Can she speak?
Does she remember? According to the medical report, Judge Monroe continued, raising her hand for silence, Mrs. Johnson is conscious and responsive. However, she has significant memory loss. She doesn't remember the assault. In fact, she doesn't remember the past 6 months at all. The relief Kwame had felt moments before curdled into something else. She didn't remember. She didn't remember him hurting her. She didn't remember the terror or the pain. She's been asking for you, Judge Monroe added, reading from the report. She's confused about why she's in the hospital and where her husband is. The doctors have advised against telling her about the assault until she's stronger. Mr. Williams stood again. Your Honor, with all due respect, my daughter deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know what this man did to her. And she will know, Judge Monroe said firmly. But that's a medical decision, not a legal one. What concerns this court is justice and appropriate sentencing. She looked at Kwame for a long moment, then at the papers before her, then back at the families filling her courtroom. Mr. Johnson, you have committed serious crimes. You have caused immeasurable harm. However, I also note that you have taken full responsibility for your actions. You haven't made excuses or tried to minimize your guilt. That shows at least some capacity for genuine remorse. She paused, considering. I'm sentencing you to 15 years in state prison for aggravated assault, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. You will also be required to complete an extensive domestic violence intervention program while incarcerated. Upon release, you will be subject to a permanent restraining order keeping you at least 500 feet away from Mrs. Johnson and your children, unless she explicitly requests otherwise in writing. 15 years. Kwame absorbed the number. His sons would be teenagers when he got out if he got out. He would miss their first words, first steps, first days of school. He would be a stranger to them. Additionally, Judge Monroe continued, I'm ordering you to participate in a program that allows inmates to speak to at-risk youth and others about domestic violence. Your story, Mr. Johnson, needs to be told. Not to excuse what you've done, but to prevent others from making the same mistakes. Yes, Your Honor, Kwame said quietly. Thank you. Don't thank me, Judge Monroe said sharply. Thank God that your wife survived. Thank God that your children are alive. And spend every day of your sentence working to become the man your mother believed you could be. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Officers, please escort the prisoner back to custody. As they led Kwame away, he caught Aunt Teresa's eye. She was crying, but she gave him a small nod. Not approval, but acknowledgement. A recognition that the path ahead would be long and painful, but that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for some kind of redemption. Back in his cell, Kwame sat on the hard bench and finally allowed himself to feel something other than guilt and despair. Amara was alive.
His sons were alive.
They would grow up without him. Yes, but they would grow up. They would have a chance at life. 3 weeks later, Kwame received a letter. It was from Mrs. Williams, and his hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a photograph of 2 tiny babies, now bigger and healthier, no longer connected to tubes and wires. Written on the back in neat handwriting, Marcus and William, going home today. Amara is recovering well. She still doesn't remember what happened, but she's getting stronger every day. She asks about you sometimes. We tell her you're away for work. We don't know if that's kindness or cruelty, but it's what the doctors recommended. These boys will know the truth when they're old enough to understand. Until then, they'll know love. That's the one thing we can promise them that you couldn't. Kwame taped the photograph to the wall of his cell. He looked at it every morning and every night. His sons. His beautiful sons who would grow up knowing their mother's love, their grandparents' devotion, and eventually, the truth about their father. Years would pass. Kwame would become a model prisoner, speaking to thousands of young men about the dangers of violence, about the importance of breaking cycles, about the terrible cost of uncontrolled rage. Some would listen. Some would change their paths. And maybe, just maybe, Amara's suffering would prevent another woman from experiencing the same nightmare. It wasn't redemption. Redemption was too big a word for what Kwame could achieve. But it was purpose. And in the darkness of his cell, in the weight of his guilt, purpose was enough to keep him going. Amara would eventually remember. The doctors said memory could return at any time. When it did, when she remembered everything he'd done to her, Kwame knew he would lose even the small comfort of her occasional questions about him.
But that was as it should be.
That was justice. The only thing Kwame could control now was who he chose to become in the aftermath of his worst actions. He couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the damage, couldn't take back the violence. But he could spend every remaining day of his life making sure that his story served as a warning, that his mistakes illuminated a path others could avoid. It was the very least he owed to Amara, to his sons, to his mother's memory, and to every person who had ever believed he could be better. As Kwame sat in his cell that night, looking at the picture of Marcus and William, he whispered a promise. Not to them. He'd lost the right to make promises to his children. But to himself. I will do better. Not for forgiveness. Not for redemption. But because it's the only way to honor the wreckage I've caused. Because it's the only way to make sure their mother's suffering means something. Because it's the only way to become the man I should have been all along. And in the quiet of that cell, surrounded by the consequences of his violence, Kwame Johnson began the long, painful journey of becoming someone new. Someone who would spend the rest of his life trying to prevent other men from making the same devastating mistakes he had made. The story doesn't end with a happy reconciliation or a neat resolution. Real life rarely does. But it ends with a commitment to change, to growth, to using pain as a teacher rather than an excuse. If this story has moved you, if it's made you think about the cycles of violence in your own life or community, please share it. Hit that subscribe button if you believe stories like this need to be told. Leave a comment about how we can all work together to end domestic violence. Because the truth is, Kwame's story isn't unique. Somewhere right now, another Amara is suffering in silence. Another family is being torn apart by violence. And another man is walking the path that Kwame walked, not yet understanding where it leads. Let this story be a light in that darkness. Let it be a warning, a wake-up call, and maybe, just maybe, a turning point for someone who needs it.
Thank you for watching until the end.
Remember, it's never too late to choose differently. It's never too late to break the cycle. It's never too late to become the person you were meant to be.